Today, my guest is Professor Peter Buckley, and I will keep my introduction short to maximize our time with him. In the next 30 minutes, we'll talk about Peter as a person. Professor Buckley is a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and is a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. And I should address Peter as Sir Buckley because in 2012, by the Queen, he was appointed as the Officer of the Order of the British Empire, and this recognition is awarded to someone for making a great impact in their line of work. So let's start, and thank you, Sir Buckley, for joining us.
A pleasure.
First, let's talk about Peter, who Peter is. My first question is, what did you want to become when you were a child?
Believe it or not, my first ambition was to be a ballet dancer. I was soon disabused of that, and my next ambition was to be a tram driver. The third ambition that I had was to be an academic, which came from absolutely nowhere, because my family, none of them had ever been to university, none of my friends had. Apart from my teachers, I didn't know anyone who had a degree. But suddenly I wanted to be an academic, and frankly, I've never regretted that.
That's great. You actually started at a higher point. I wanted to be a trash collecting truck driver because I thought they were the coolest. Can you pinpoint the earliest moment of awareness between domestic versus international?
I had an interest in things international from a very early age, and I tried to persuade my parents to go to France. And we set off on a ferry, but the weather in the English Channel was too bad and we had to turn back. So I never made it to France when I was 8 or 9, but I did make it to France, Belgium and Luxembourg when I was about 11. With the Scouts. That was my first holiday with the Boy Scouts in Echternach in Luxembourg. And of course, Luxembourg is between France and Germany, so we had a lot of fun sort of swimming across the river and pretending that we were invading France or we were invading Germany. So it was, and the different languages and different foods and different cultures, I think made an impression on me even at that age.
Wow. Isn't the channel supposed to be very cold? Like, how did you sustain?
Very cold. This was the height of an English summer in June, and it was freezing cold. There was a storm blowing. We had hail. Nearly everyone was ill. So my first attempt to cross the channel failed dismally.
That's interesting. So how or when did you choose to be an IB scholar?
When I was in grammar school, in high school, a very exotic subject of economics was introduced. And I was very keen on being among the first scholars to do economics at school. And so we did economics, and my idea of economics, and still my idea of economics, is that it should be an applied subject, it should be of value. So I wanted to do something that was applied. I wanted to apply economics to real world problems. And essentially, when I came to the level of master's degree, the applied economics that there was development economics, which suited me because I was already very interested in issues of development. So I did a development MA. And right from being, even before that, in undergraduate economics, one of the things that really interested me was the multinational firm, because I saw that as the ultimate form of firm. And I also saw the impact of multinational firms on development and multinational firms in developing countries as a key issue determining welfare of poor people. So I came into international business through development economics.
Interesting. So what is something not many people know about you, something that's not on your CV?
Well, I never put on my CV the fact that I was head chorister at church when I was a child. I had quite a good treble, boy soprano voice. If you heard me singing now, you would not believe that. But yes, head chorister St. George's Parish Church, Mossley. Not
So
on
do you
my
continue?
CV, but a great achievement. Great achievement. And it was wonderful. I learned so much about music and history and the church and culture and so on from that. Marvelous.
I mean, right now there's COVID going on, so there's no real church activity, but do you normally continue singing in the chorus?
I don't sing. No, I don't. The most I ever do is read the lesson.
Okay. If you stop doing what you're doing today, what would be your second best alternative career path?
A historian. I almost became a historian. At my A-levels, the A-levels I did were economics, maths, and history, which is an unusual combination, but actually a great combination for economics and for international business. And it was absolutely on a knife edge when I went to university whether I would do economics or history. And I retain a great deal of interest in history. My leisure reading is history. I've got piles of history books all around my feet, if you could see the room. So, historian.
What tipped the scales in favor of economics?
Advice from people who suggested it would be easier to get a job with an economics degree than with a history degree.
Interesting. Well, what is one thing you wish you would have done, but you didn't?
So many things. Meet Marilyn Monroe. No, not having command of other languages. I think I really should have done more, for instance, with French. I had a visiting professorship at the Sorbonne, and when I first started there, I would be asked questions in French and would answer in English. And I really should have made more effort to have a command of French. I can get around in France, I can order meals, I can do things, but academically, no. So I think learn a language. On the other hand, learning a language is a big commitment unless you have, cultural links. So I think that's probably a regret. And if I had learned French, I probably would have gone on to do one or two others. There's still time, of course. There's still time to learn it.
I see. Well, this question might naturally apply to you, but what was your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
Well, really, one has so many failures. I think there's one or two things that I've written that could have been better. What you learn from your failures is to try harder next time not to make the same mistakes. I think everybody's entitled to one mistake, but continually making the same mistake is probably a way to madness. So learning from it's what you learn from your mistakes that are important. Not that if you've never made a mistake, you've never done anything, and no academic ever has not made a mistake. But we have to learn from them.
Now, this question also is a very easy one for you. What are you most proud of? But please try to answer outside the field of academia, something that you're proud of other than your scholarly work.
Other than scholarly work, children, grandchildren, having two reasonable people as my children and one lovely little girl as my granddaughter. Great achievements.
How old is she?
2.
Wow, perfect age.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. Great fun, great fun. And seeing people develop and learn, like everyone else, they all have obstacles to overcome. But yeah, those are important.
And what are you most passionate about?
Well, probably I have to say, probably academic work, probably where are we with international business, where is the multinational? But outside that, I'm very passionate about sport. I'm a great supporter of generally failing football teams, namely Blackpool, and a reasonable cricket team, namely Lancashire, and England teams. So I'm passionate about that, and I can get very irrational about sport if I'm not careful.
Perfect. Now let's talk about Professor Buckley as a researcher, as a thought leader, and imagine you're stranded in a small village and you sought refuge in a small neighborhood pub, and the locals are curious about who you are, what you do for a living. If you had to summarize your research to the audience, what would you say? And if they ask, why is this important? What would you respond?
Well, I think I would start by trying to explain to them in simple terms what comparative advantage is, that some people are better at some things than others, but if we all specialize in what we're best at, then we all do well. And I would go on from that to talk a little bit about the importance of international trade and then international business, and how the multinational enterprise is a good thing because it's innovative and a bad thing because it's got power, and this is important to all of us. And I would point to their Apple iPhones, and I would point to the local beer they drink, and I would say, you know, why are some things organized on a global scale and some things on a local scale, and what are the benefits and so on. And if by that time they hadn't got angry with me, I would be very upset.
Right now, especially in the US, the increased nationalistic sentiment is fueling this backlash against the MNC. And this brings me also my research. What are, in your opinion, what are a few of the omitted variables in IB research?
Well, I'm not sure omitted variables is right, possibly underestimated variables. And I would say the very one that you've just alluded to, I would say the importance of the political context in which multinationals work, and the kind of bringing back in the broadest sense the idea of political economy as the grounding for in which international business operates and in which multinational firms operate. And I think this is coming back in, but I think we probably neglected it too much. We have taken, as recent article with Merc.H.C says, we have taken too much the boardroom view and not enough of the bird's eye view of multinationals. So the wider political and indeed social context of multinationals, I would say, has been underestimated.
Political sides. Well, how about your creativity? How would you describe creativity in scholarship? And your research is very creative, has always been creative. How do you describe that?
I think you have to start with the viewpoint that all knowledge is provisional. That you have to start with the viewpoint that even though these great people, you know, Heimer and Dunning and all the people who went before us said good things, they didn't get it right. And what's more, Buckley and Casson and everybody else haven't got it right. You have to take the view that you have something to add. You have to be self-confident to a ridiculous degree to put forward a new theory of the multinational or whatever. But you have to believe in what you're doing. So I would say creativity is about pursuing an idea as far as you can go with it.
Interesting. Let's talk about ideal curiosity states, or what does your mind think of when it wanders freely in a state of ideal curiosity?
Well, all kinds of things, really. It's sort of the riddle of the universe. I found myself, you know, I knew you were going to ask this question, and I thought, what have I thought about recently? And one of the things I thought about recently was the issue of why certain parts of the body regrow and others don't. So why you can regrow a toenail if you lose it, but you can't regrow an eye. I don't know the answer, and that's just a sort of idle thought, you know. So all kinds of things, really. And I think a lot about historical issues and why people did certain things and why certain things turned out the way they did. Why did the Roman Empire fall and stuff like that?
Because I'm trying to see some sort of a connection between your history past or interest in history, or the history of multinationals, organizations, how things are evolving, and how does it impact your creative output in the work that you've done as a body of research. I'm trying to make a connection.
Well, if you look at history and look at events in history, you've always got this idea of, well, what didn't happen? Why did William the Conqueror defeat the Anglo-Saxons and change Britain dramatically? What would have happened if Harold had won at Hastings? Or what would have happened if the Roman Empire hadn't fallen? Why this alternative? And that's exactly what we do in international business, because if you ask the question, why did firm X make a foreign investment? You could equally ask, why did firm X not export or not license or not, if it went in greenfield, why did it not do a merger and acquisition or whatever? So there are always alternatives, and decision makings about choosing between alternatives. So historical figures like Napoleon making decisions is not much different from the chief executive of Apple making decisions. So I think there's a very strong parallel. And if you think, the trajectories of history and how they could have turned out differently, it's not that different from thinking about business strategy and why certain firms are successful and others aren't.
At Berkeley, there was a psychology course on alternative. It was a psychology course, but it was about alternative historical paths and marginal thinking. And the question was about what if scenarios. What if the Germans won the Second World War, not the US? This is interesting. So where do you see the IB research in the next 5 to 10 years? What's the next big thing that we will see?
Well, I think there have been a number of very profound changes in the environment. I mean, obviously, COVID-19 is one of them, but anti-globalization moves is another very significant factor. And what is driving that is the left behind. I just finished an article for Academy of Management Perspectives, which we were asked to do something provocative. And my one is the future of international business is the left behind, looking at the left behind, looking at why people have not benefited from globalization and the reaction to it, and can anything be done about it, and should anything be done about it. So I think that the vast political changes that have been brought by the virus and by anti-globalization rhetoric and policies are changing the environment, and that will be the case for a while. I'm just doing a thing that I'm writing about short-term changes, long-term changes, and what I call long-term changes. And the long-term changes, maybe we'll go back to things like cartels, where firms don't own things but have agreements, so you could have get round the political barriers that way. So yeah, quite a lot of, I think the anti-globalization movement makes international business more important, not less important. Differences between countries are going to be more significant, not less significant, and that is really meat and drink for international business specialists.
From your window, how did the culture of IB scholars evolve over time? And is this a fruitful evolution? What did we lose? What did we gain along the path?
Well, when I began in international business, which was in the Middle Ages for most people, but was in the 70s, it was a much more open and kind of free-thinking community than it is now. I think the kind of pioneering days up to the late 70s, you know, people like John Dunning and as leaders and so on. There was a very wide acceptance of a very wide range of different points of view and thinking. And I think naturally, as a subject develops, that kind of narrows down. And I think it has been in danger of becoming too narrow, too focused, if you like, just on the boardroom and not so much on the environment and the international business environment. But I think it's actually changing again. I think we may have reached points where things like economic geography, business history, and political science come in and make that a much wider aspect. So I would like to see a wider view of international business. I would also like to see a deeper view, in the sense that not everything written that's good about international business was written after 2010. You know, if we're talking about anti-globalization and we're talking about the rise of the nation state, then Frederick List, you know, is a vital source. The fact that he wrote, you know, getting on for 200 years ago doesn't mean that the ideas are not relevant. And so not all knowledge is contained in the last 6 years of Gibbs. And I think we have to, you know, cast the net a bit wider and think broader, and not become too obsessed with what was written in the most recent AMR.
Mm-hmm. With Oded Shankar, we're working on this forgotten variables concept, and we do talk about socioeconomic, political, geopolitical dynamics that are shifting right now. This is out of equilibrium. The entire system is out of equilibrium at the moment. So, I mean, you kind of touched on it, but let me ask you straightforward this time. Which IB questions are overly studied, and which areas are less fruitful? Without naming names, but areas.
No, I think the kind of default position when a doctoral student comes along and doesn't quite know what to do is to say, well, look at entry strategy of a certain industry in a certain country. You know, look at entry strategy of microcomputer firms into Brazil or whatever it is. And I think that kind of approach probably, you know, leads to some marginal improvement and some interesting results, but it's not exactly earth-shattering. So I think the danger is to focus on issue, just to revisit things and move things across, rather than try and think fundamentally about what the key questions are. So I wouldn't say there's anything really been overdone, because replication studies are very important. But I think there's probably a case for looking rather more widely when we look at the subjects, because there's so much going on that we're not too clear about. The Belt and Road Initiative and things like that are really important, right at the forefront, happening now, and really worthy of investigation, because we can use the techniques that we've got already to look at that in greater detail.
Thank you. Now you started giving advice. I would like to switch gears to talking about you as a mentor. And what do you wish you'd known when you were starting out?
I think I wish I'd known that the key requirement for this game is resilience, that you have to be resilient, that you will get knocked down time and time again. I mean, my doctoral students and others say to me, surely you don't get papers rejected. And I tell them I could paper the walls with rejection letters that I've had in the past 2 or 3 years. And that is in a way a very good thing, because just because, you know, people don't know it's me, sometimes they can tell, obviously, but you have to jump the hoop every time. In this game, you have to start fresh every time you submit an article, and you can get knocked down every time. And it's very dispiriting when you get knocked down. I mean, for younger scholars, it is really, really difficult when the first, second, maybe third attempt to publish an article gets knocked back. But you have to, if you believe in what you're doing, you have to be resilient, you have to get up, you have to try again, and you have to have a certain amount of self-confidence and also interest in what you're doing, because if you're not interested in something, nobody else is going to be. So I would say the thing the key thing is to be resilient.
So which skills, which skills were the most difficult to develop over time, or over, like in a revised summit situation?
Any worthwhile skill has to be really worked at. There is such a thing as natural ability, but you really have to work at your skills. When I did my PhD, at Lancaster University, my supervisor was and is an Indian, Professor Balasubramaniam. He made me rewrite my PhD 6 times, maybe 7 times. Your sentences are too long. You're not putting the same things in the paragraph where they belong. You're not explaining that idea. You've assumed people know that when they don't. And that was a really hard lesson, because I thought, you know, first time it was brilliant. And clearly it wasn't getting the message over. And having to work, rework, and constantly rework articles and pieces of writing is essential. You have to learn it. It's hard, but you have to learn it. I think all technical skills, how to manage data, how to do all the qualitative and quantitative skills, really have to be learned. I mean, people, you have to go through an apprenticeship on all these things, and to have somebody who can help you through it is really great. But it's not easy. As the saying goes, if it were easy, everybody would be doing it.
Well, what are the top 3 mistakes for IB scholars that they should avoid?
Top 3. It's very, I think it depends. I think the most difficult thing to do is to pick the right context level and approach for any question that you've got. The most difficult thing is finding the research question. Once you've found the research question, then it becomes a lot easier. But one of the difficulties in international business is we have many different levels. So we have the level of the firm, the manager, the global economy, lots of different levels. We have lots of different methods of analysis, economics, sociology, whatever you care to name. And it's picking the right issues. And because international business is phenomenon driven, so we're looking, I mentioned one earlier, the Belt and Road, that's a phenomenon we need to look at. You can look at that from an economics point of view, a social point of view, a political point of view, a development point of view, finance point of view, and how you pick that and how you, and different levels. Are we talking about the Chinese government strategy? Are we talking about individual state-owned companies that are involved in that? Are we talking about individual host countries, individual projects? And how do you put all that together? That's tough, and that's why international business is a hard subject and a fascinating subject, because we have all these different potential approaches, and picking the right one, choosing the right approach, the right methodology for each individual research question is the difficulty.
My last question is, what's the question that I should have asked you but didn't?
You haven't asked anything about relationships with other people. You haven't asked about relationships you asked about family earlier on, I think, but you haven't asked about collaborative relationships with other researchers, and I think that's massively important. If you look at my CV, if you alluded to it earlier, there are huge numbers of joint authors, co-authors, fellow researchers, fellow grant takers, and so on. And working with them has enhanced my career dramatically. I learned from all of my co-authors. I mean, this isn't just well-established people. This is also doctoral students and anybody. And you have to, I think, collaborate in order to do the things that I was just talking about, seeing different aspects of a theory, a phenomenon or a theory, working at different things. So collaboration is extremely important. You know, John Donne said, no man is an island, and certainly no academic is an island. You have to work with other people. And I think working with other people has, we could spend another half hour, I think, on issues of working with other people, choosing co-authors, and in the alternative scenario, not choosing co-authors, i.e. who you work with and who you don't work with, are very, very important. And I think you know, in an approach like this, you've put me and I very central, but a lot of this is actually we.
Okay. Well, thank you, Peter, for this very interesting and candid interview. It's been half an hour. I learned a lot, and I'm sure many will agree with me. We all learned a lot from your expertise, your mentoring, your guidance. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
So now I'm going